Yeah, it's just like that. People like Greg Boyd, not only him, but other people, they love to use this word, recapitulation. And when it says that Christ recapitulated human history, it doesn't mean that he canceled it, right? Or negated it or absolved it or anything like that. What it means is he rewrote it. Hallelujah. He rewrote what it meant, what human history and the suffering and the tragedy was actually about. We can see that on the cross, and to be able to look at the Old Testament from the eyes of Jesus recapitulating human history, I tell you what, it revolutionizes your ability to read the Bible. It makes you not want to pitch it like some people on the comment. He said, "Do we tear away that part of the Bible, which actually is the bulk of the Bible?" And the answer is not until you realize recapitulation. Not until you really understand what Jesus is doing here. Right. It's not like you are starting over with a blank slate, right, Sandy? It's not just a blank tablet here that now we can, write something new. God has completely rewritten what it means to be you. And there is a you that existed all along, right? That was simply veiled, it was covered, it was not awakened. And when God saves us, when we realize salvation, suddenly our true personality can begin to shine through. And of course, there's lots of unfortunate teachings that talk about Jesus is like this huge blanket that simply covers up who we really are because it's wretched, to God. But that is completely misunderstanding what it means to be made in God's image and likeness, and it kind of, I think, it unnecessarily quashes who we are, only in favor of who Christ is. Well, I have news for you. Jesus Christ came to reveal who we truly are, which is in Him. He is the anointed one who came to the earth to destroy the works of the devil and set people free, and we are anointed ones in that same image. In talking about the Bible, most ancient people, they were very capable of understanding way more profound and reasonable implications than we realize. Some people do have this misunderstanding about the Bible that primitive man was unable to understand great things. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have heard about this. This is a fallacy called the chronological fallacy. And it exists both ways, by the way. That old people didn't understand very much compared to new people. That new people, modern people rather, are those that really have a huge advantage, right, over people that lived, say, in the Old Testament. And I think that's mischaracterized also, at least to some degree. I'll tell you the truth. Everybody here who's not in Asia or Africa has a great deal that's already been cut off from your life just by virtue of being born in a modern Western society. And one of those things that has been cut off is our everyday realization and experience of the supernatural. Let's just be honest about that. We live in a society that a lot of the supernatural has just been stripped off of our life. That's one of the reasons why I think, I'm not a psychologist, but I think that's one of the reasons why there's depression, why there's this great feeling of void in people's lives, why trying to make it in a materialist economy and following the world system, the economic system, just can't produce the level of joy that we're trying to get. You know what I mean? Everybody's trying to work their hustle and trying to get up the leg up in this economy. Investing in cryptocurrency and everything like that. Is that the answer? Everything like that. It's just you're just feeding into that mischaracterization of what real life is. Not that those things are evil necessarily, but there is a whole side of human experience that is much more readily available, I guess you might say, when you go to countries like Africa and Asia and things like that. You're able to see the relationship that people have with the environment around them is different. The relationship people have, especially with other people, is way different. I'm just going to be honest and say that moving back to Canada is kind of eye opening in many ways. I don't have there's kind of a tendency to ignore the people around you here. I just don't know if it's better. You know what I'm saying? That there's a lot that's missing, and so when you try to read the Bible from that perspective, there's some things that also that you can miss or misunderstand. I think one of the biggest things is in reading the epistles of Paul, when he says you, or whatever the equivalent is in Greek. We tend to in the West read that individually. Oh, it's me, it's Colin he's talking to here, or someone like me in the first century. But what you realize is that most of the time he's talking to an entire community. He's talking to a whole group of people, and everybody is going together in that endeavor with it, and everybody is taking Paul's instruction and attempting to do it as a community, as a body, which is why he talks, at length about the body, and it's composed of many members, and each member is not greater or lesser than the other, and by any means, they're not alone. And unfortunately, in the West, when you read the Bible, you tend to see it as I am an arm cut off, I am a leg that's cut off, I am a head that's cut off, I'm an ear or a nose, and it's kind of this disembodied, decapitated kind of thing. And but really, from the perspective of the Bible, it's togetherness. It's in a community. There's a real oneness that happens there. So having that kind of chronological fallacy and kind of makes us believe that modern people are just more, able to understand things in the Bible. And I think most of us that come at least from Welton Academy know that that's just not true. That the context of the Bible is a little bit divorced, maybe more than a little bit divorced from our current context. And so it takes a little bit of legwork, right? It takes a little bit of thinking. It takes a little bit of trying to discover what the context was like in that ancient world in order to understand where they're coming from. And sometimes we're surprised by the level of wisdom that they actually had, and some ways that surpasses our own. The Genesis origin stories, the stories that we find in Genesis, these are, I believe, very sophisticated tools for the preservation and even creation of deep cultural and religious identity within a people who were in exile. We know that this was written in the context of Israel in exile and or just returning to Jerusalem and its surroundings. And so when we read the Bible, it's also important, I think, to understand that the Bible became, these Old Testament scriptures, the Torah and so on, became a kind of way for the people of Israel to form deep and lasting cultural, religious identities and community with each other in exile, because they really wanted to preserve, right, their culture, their people. And they did that by creating this body of literature that they could all kind of rely on, could kind of depend on. We know that in that time, the written word was not seen as highly as the oral, what they call the oral Torah, passing on from one generation to another. The traditions that they had from the ancient times was more important than, say, just this written body of literature, what we call the Old Testament right now. And that continued on through Jesus's time. But when the Temple of Jerusalem, that some of us have studied, was destroyed, then Judaism had to completely reformulate itself, and that's when the written Torah took precedence. That's when it really started to be important and prominent in rabbinic Judaism. But before that, it was a lot of stories that were handed down from father to son, from teacher to student. The Genesis origin story, that was a very sophisticated tool to preserve and create that deep cultural and religious identity within exile. There was whole schools that thrived in Babylon as well as in Jerusalem, and they were concerned with keeping this thing going, even though we are not at home.